Thank you.
Let's see where I am here. Okay, here. Hold on a second. Slideshow. Current slide.
Wonderful.
Okay, so last week we started talking about the nature, the kind of life that these Jews lived. One of the wonderful things about um, what the remains, of literary remains that we have from Renaissance Italy. And next week, I hope to start talking about. We'll start talking about culture and stuff like that, music and so on. Is that we have a large number of Shelot Teshuvot, which were not heavily edited. I mean, they're somewhat edited, but not terribly. Why is that important? It's important because what happens to responsa is that when a guy writes a letter to a rav, so he'll usually throw in every bit of information he thinks relevant, whether it is or not, to the posek. The posek then has to choose between the various details to see what's relevant. But for the historian, it's a treasure trove because what the posek doesn't think is relevant can actually shed incredible light on the circumstances or in general the life of the person asking. What happens largely when chuvas are edited is that the editor is interested in creating a book of legal precedents. So he's going to generally cut out names, addresses. Everybody becomes Reuven and Shimon. All Christians become Canaanim and Samaritans and God knows only what else, because it's not relevant for the legal history. But as it happens, this is, and then you have to break your head to try to read between the lines. But in this case, we have a lot of poskim, maybe because a lot of the stuff was in state and manuscript, whatever the reason is, where we can really use the chuvot to get a sense of the fabric of life. A and B, it gives us a bigger appreciation of the way that poskim actually dealt with a very dynamic and sometimes unprecedented life situation. So this is one of my favorite stories because it just sheds light upon so many different facets of Italian Jewish life in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, even leading on to the up to the emancipation. So this is from Shalot Jabot Maharik. It dates. The date is around 1470, 1469, 1470, and we're going to do this one. We're going to do inside. Ani Hatzair Sheba Kohanim. I am a young guy living. I'm a Kohen, living in Eretz Hamim. The issue is that there is this Eretz Hamim, of course, a Kohen's not Eretz Hamim is any place outside of Israel, and there is an ordinance of Chazal, a prohibition of Chazal for Kohanim to live outside of Eretz Israel because they declared that any place outside of Eretz Israel is suspect of being essentially tameh, because you never know where the graves are and so on. And I had a student, he did a doctorate with me, who was he's originally from Teaneck, but once he came here, he actually never left the country because of this gezerah there. It's but anyways, so he says I'm a Kohen living in the defiled world, and my name is Yechiel Cohen Zal. I'm Hakim. My name is Hakim or Chacham. Then my father's name is Yechiel Cohen. May he rest in peace. We know, as we'll see in a little bit, his Hakim was his Hebrew name. His English name was Falcone. One of the things about Italians is they, as opposed to when you look at among Sephardic Jews, it's very common to find use of Arabic names, and among Ashkenazi Jews, relatively rare. Certainly not until the early modern period that you find a lot of non-Jewish names, but among Italians, it's like a given. And in fact, it's such a given that there's even lumdus to it. So I'll give a classical example. One of the sometimes when you find Italian names in notarial documents, it's just straight translation of the Hebrew. So, for example, it's very common to find a person whose name is Deodato. Deodato means God gives, and that's the translation of Yoav, which is a way of translating Yoav. You have well, sometimes they're really elegant. So, for example, it's very, very common to call for Italian Jews to be called Angelo. Angelo means angel, obviously, and so why call a person Angelo? Angelo is always Mordechai, consistently. And why is that? By the way, one of the I think one of Netanyahu's lawyers, I forget his first name. His last name is Rabello. His father is a famous scholar of Mishpat Ivrit Hebrew. His name is Mordechai Angelo Rabello. So why Angelo? Because there are the two opinions among Chazal as to who was Malachi. Now, the normal the consensus is generally the Malachi is Ezra, but there is a minority opinion in the Midrash that in fact Angelo Malachi was actually Mordechai. So that's where you get Mordechai is Angelo. So you got all kinds of interesting things. Anyways, so his name is Falcone Hakim, son of Yechiel Cohen. Asher ani shochen bePavia ha'ira. He lives in Pavia. Pavia was the ancient capital of the Lombard Kingdom in northern Italy. In this time, around 1469, 1470, it's a major city, but it is under the rule of Milan. It's part of the Duchy of Milan. You can visit it today. Here's a picture of the center of the city not many years ago. Hine bata bati. He says, I'm turning to you. Al devar ishti. I've got a problem with my wife. He couldn't write to Dr. Phil, so he's writing to the Maravik. Al devar ishti b'nivchei yam v'imkei sha'ol ha'she'elah ha'amuka. He says, I have a really serious problem. Imkei sha'ol will tell you not just the depth of the problem, but the fact that he's living in something of a hell. Ladat al pi Torah, kedat ma la'asot bezot ha'isha. What am I going to do with my wife? Chashva keparas soreret. She's like a recalcitrant cow. Kirega asher nireba hanega, and there's some kind of a nega. We'll come to this. Kiloi da'ana efna lasara. I don't know where to turn because this is a really serious, heavy-duty business. Imlo elchana el hamorim agdolim hamirim v'dvrim b'plilim v'hema kelokim. I've got to go upline. I got to go to the top to the greatest poskim. Lemor elehem horuni atem haorim v'atumim. He says, I have to turn to you, and to you I will. Anything you say will be fine. I'm not going to. By the way, I'm also. I'm not going to read through this whole introduction because it's very florid. But the point is, as we'll see, this guy's an innkeeper. All right, and this is an autograph. This is basically his letter. Notice how beautifully he writes. This is beautiful Hebrew. It's florid, elegant Hebrew. One of the things that marks Italian Jews, as opposed to Ashkenazim, is that every single male and many, many women were taught to read and write. Speak is another issue, but read and write, not just not just an understandable, a comprehensible Hebrew, but just an elegant lyrical Hebrew. It was part of their. When we look at the curriculum for the proposed to Hebrew University in Mantova, a little bit after this time, we'll see that was part of the education. You were supposed to learn how to read and write Hebrew, which, by the way, it's really. And they're living in Italy. They're not speaking Hebrew, but nevertheless, knowing Hebrew properly and being able to communicate they even practiced letter writing as a literary form. Here's an example. Here's an entire volume. It's called Igrot Yehudei Italia. And it's not just letters of Italian Jews, but it also includes a lot of form letters which were imitated by or used as sort of form letters to teach people how to write properly. And again, this is in a very, very small community as part of the curriculum. I think about the state of Hebrew literacy, even in the day schools in the United States, and the contrast cannot be any starker. Anyways, so that's really that was something else I wanted wanted to point out here that this guy who's, as I said, is going to find out is an innkeeper. He he has no problem laying out his problem and writing in a dignified Hebrew to the leading posek of the era. Now let's see what the problem was. Okay, what's the issue? I'm gonna really, this is not nice on my part, but I'm gonna say Zoktar Azay. This is what he this is what he says. This is what I'm asking of my Lord. Okay. In other words, yamim is what? Yamim is days, but also means years. Years and years and years and years and years and years. I live in Pavia. Hayas chari lishtanot. I had, my income wasn't, it was regular, but it wasn't always it was always set. Liot bal machaneh b'Pavia. I own an inn, which means he probably has a rough. An inn doesn't just mean a building. It means he has to have stables. It means he has to have a kitchen, a public kitchen. It means it's not a small investment. He's got a whole operation there. Ufilati lifanai haita ad shnat reish lamed, and I was there until 1469, 1470. Asher kama Ezrati, my wife, Ezra Kenegdo be l'satanli, and at that point my wife had it, and she was like the Satan. She was my Kenegdoli lachem, as it were. Lemor azov ta'azov tamalacha hazot. I can't take living here anymore. It's enough already. You promised we were going to go live in Flatbush, and you're sitting here stuck with this hotel in this inn in. All right, she doesn't want to live in Flatbush, but she wants to go live in Mantova. She wants to go live in. Well, there's no just in Milan. She wants to live in Florence. I don't want to live out of town anymore. I'm not kidding. I'm not. I know being anachronistic, but this is really what she's talking about. She says, leave it enough. Va'amrali dvarim shaltam. And the fact of the matter is, what she was saying made sense. But I didn't pay attention. Vayihi kidabra elai yom vayom kemo shisha chodashim. For 6 months, she was draining me a cup every single day. Close the shop. I want to move. I can't live here anymore. V'lo shamati bekola, and I ignored her. Ki midechi el dechi holachti, and I kept putting her off. Vatirav hamariva beini levena, and it got to be pretty intense. We were constantly fighting. Ad Rosh Chodesh Adar Shnat Reish Lamed, until March 1470. Vani betoch beiti, and I'm sitting in the house. Lomeid im biti. Now, this is not a statement, a programmatic statement. Girls got education, and he was sitting there learning with his daughter. Vatakam haisha ishti be'odei tzorayim. Towards noon, my wife had it. Barla, as we would say. Vatiklachla klei kesef. She took some silver vessels. Uklei edim me'aleh, some jewelry. Telechla beveit shchina achat nochrit. She went to a neighbor, a non-Jewish Christian neighbor, Asher hayta regila tamid etzla, who she was always hanging out with this woman. Why? Ki tafrala bigdei pishtan ba'adi u'ba'ad anshe beiti. Okay. Who did she go run away to? She ran away to the Ozeret. She ran away to the seamstress and laundress of the family. Now think about this for a minute. This is a guy of means. This is a guy who has standing in the community. And the wife runs away. The only place she can find to be able to a sort of like an open ear to her is the laundress, is the help. So this is we're talking about a very stratified society, and she goes running to the maid. Okay. And he was so involved in teaching his daughter that his wife was gone for half an hour. Until I asked my daughters. Now apparently he didn't have any sons, but he's giving an equal education to his daughters. Whether the fact he didn't have sons was also an issue between him and his wife, I don't know. My friend Ruven Bonfil used to think yes. I don't know. I think that might be reading too much into it. But I asked my daughters, Ana halcha. I said, where did mom go? I was involved. I was orangutan and learning with my daughter. Ulefeta, and all of a sudden, I freaked out. All of a sudden, I'm sitting there going, oh. I started getting my kishka started moving. But Yeruni Lisholet Benotai, and all of a sudden I asked my daughters, Aye Iman, where's Ima? But Tomarnali, they told me that she went out. Now, apparently this was not so common. But Narak Tana, and not only that, but she took my youngest daughter, who was 4 years old. She grabbed the baby and left. And I went to look. So I went to check the other Jewish women, the other Jews. That's the first place I checked. And I didn't find her. Maybe you know what? So it occurred to me, maybe she's at the shiksa. And I ran there. I went to the shiksa's house. I found the door was closed. It might have been locked. Now that apparently, why is that unusual? It may very well be that in that part of Pavia, people didn't lock the door. I don't know if any of you remember, but there was a time in Israel when nobody locked the doors. The fakti shows I banged on the door. But I knocked on the door of Baal Bayit, so the laundress's husband, Miad Patach, he opened up the door, and he opened up in a crack, and he sees it's me. I'm married to the woman who's in his house. He got nervous. He tried to slam the door in my face. He didn't succeed. I forced my way in. Isn't this very dramatic? And who was there? Mishneh HaHegmon Shayashta, the deputy bishop of Pavia. Now, you want to get a sense of what that meant for a Jewish guy to come in and see the vice bishop is the proper term, standing there in that room. Do you remember? I mean, I don't know if any of you remember this scene. In Fiddler on the Roof, when Chava, when the third daughter disappears, and what's the wife's name? Golda goes looking for the daughter. She goes to the Russian Orthodox priest, and she goes into the church, and the priest turns around and sort of like Lord, it doesn't lord over on her, but he's sort of like he's this figure. Well, that's what a Jew felt when he sees the vice bishop in this house. So he's like, I'm sure his heart skipped more than one beat. So he sees the Mishnah Gemon Shayasham Bishamot Koli. And when he hears when the bishop heard my voice, he said, "Let him come in. Don't be afraid." With the vice bishop were two burghers, in other words, two distinguished citizens of Pavia, Ushtei Nochriot, and two non-Jewish women. Yoshvot Eitzel Aisha, the women were sitting on the other side of my wife, who's sitting on a bench. Ubita ben Zroota, and her daughter, meaning my daughter, it is in her arms. Vayihi kivoi, when I walked into the living room, Vayomer li Mishneh, Hine ishtecha hizo, is this your wife? Vamarti lo, Kain Adoni, yes, my lord. It's not sir, yes, my lord. Vayan Vayomer, it says, and he says, so he said to me, Hine ishtecha zo, you're this your wife. Labsha uta ruach acheret. Another spirit has taken over her. Lefima shira'inu, as we can see, me'ata lahamir. She wants to convert to Christianity. As soon, apparently, the wife went to the laundress. She says, "I've had it. I'm converting to Christianity." And so the husband maybe or the woman herself calls the bishop and calls other Christians, and she says, "Well, we're here. Lachein banu ledaber al liba lashuv ledat hanotzrim im bezod chashka nafsha." If that's what she wants, we are coming. We're here to convince her to convert and to facilitate the conversion. Now, as it happens, this is somewhat unusual, I must say. But if we find that she really doesn't want to do it, she should go home. But as sha'alti reshut ledaber al liba b'lashon Ashkenaz. So I asked her permission to speak to her in Yiddish. So this tells us, by the way, this is very important because, or German, but I think it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear it's Yiddish. This it has a number of implications. Number one, women in Jewish girls in Germany were not taught to read and write. But you was talking about this is obviously a family of German origin or Austrian origin. They speak Yiddish in the house, and yet he is raising his daughters in a more Italian way than in a German way from the point of the curriculum that you give your kids. That's by the way. It says, can I talk to her in Yiddish? And he says, and talk to her any way you want, but don't be mean to her. So I asked her, Lama bat heina, vavos that you get kumindo. I don't know, maybe Gimindo, I have no idea. I'm going to assume that the default is always Litva. Is always Litva Yiddish. Why are you here? Why aren't you coming home? Azamra, so she said to him, Po anochi yoshevet. I'm staying here. I have no desire to return. I can't stay. I can't continue to be an innkeeper's wife. In other words, think about this. What does this mean? It tells you the kinds of not pressure, but in Hebrew you say mu'aka, the kinds of almost depression this woman's living under. She's living in circumstances. There's a few other Jews with whom she apparently is not friendly, and she's living this life, and she's isolated, and she's so desperate. She's so desperate to start not to live like this anymore that she says, "I'd rather convert to Christianity than to stay as an innkeeper's wife." By the way, she doesn't say then to stay as your wife. I'm saying I can't stand this life anymore. But Omar eleha shuvi shuvi. I said, please come home. I've already just told you. I promise. Right, this is like Michael Corleone promised to Kay. I'm going to change. I'm going to do what you really want. Vantava Amra, and she says to him, don't play me for the fool. Al tosif hatelbi, don't ridicule me, don't mock me. Kikichashta bi ze eser pamim. You pulled this on me 10 times already. I don't believe you. As long as I see where she's at, so why are you taking our daughter? So she says, all right, you know what? Take the kid and go. Goodbye. So I took her home. All right. Now, I'm just going to show you, I have a couple of pictures here, which are whatever. What you have here is, we're going to see in a minute, to the right is a reconstruction of a period inn. The kind of the type of which this is obviously made into like a B&B. It's from Pavia, And this is basically what it didn't look like. On the left-hand side is the central convent of Pavia, which, as we'll see in about 2 seconds, is where she was sent. Okay. So what happens? So what happens is this. So I went on my way. And the vice bishop says to me, Ray Falcon, listen, Falcon, Al tibahel beruchacha elishtacha. Don't flip out over your wife. Ki lo yiyaseh ima davar bechoska v'lo beve'ala ki im b'shuva v'nachat u'v'rtzona v'terem nachlita ma'amarna. He says, first of all, we're not forcing her to do anything. Again, this is incredibly generous on the part of this bishop is really unusual in this regard. He says, we're not forcing anything. She says she wants to convert. So fine. So God's good. So, we're not going to force her to do anything. What we're going to do is this. Namidena b'makom ha'mishtamer imakom riot hatznuot. We're going to bring her to the monastery, to the convent, with the modest nuns, ashelo yavar adam sham, where there are no men there, vaytasham arba'im yom, and she'll be there for 40 days, which is usually the time that they sort of his boidedu, sort of like of meditation, in which nuns would go through anyways to decide if they want to go into the religious life. Ad melos la yemei ha'hitbodedut v'ha'hityashvut ki ken yisad baladatayid. Those are the rules. We're sending her to the convent for 40 days. Let her learn about Christianity. Let her sit and do soul searching, and then we'll see what's going to be. We're not doing anything. We're not doing everything. We're not going to do anything hastily. Okay. Malasot. Kishami. When I heard this, paniti al beiti holechu boche. I went home crying. So my oldest daughter comes out and to meet me. This unholy thing that happened to me. So the older daughter ran to her mother and said, what is the matter with you? What are you thinking? But go home. Valtiri. Don't be afraid. Don't think about me. This is a Jewish mother. So she went to go talk to one of the Jewish neighbors. So the two of them went back to the mother. She said, what are you, crazy? But so it was all this whole conversation between the daughter and the Jewish neighbor and the girl were written down. Apparently there was a notary in the room. They were doing everything up above. I got to give credit to the Catholic Church here. They were doing everything above board. It's one of the rare cases that I'm aware of where they were really so ehrlich. Within a half an hour, it's all happening very fast. And the bishop says, "Okay, send her to the nunnery, send her to the convent." But where did she send her? To the upper class, there are all kinds of different, even though ostensibly there should be no difference among priests and among monks and nuns, they're all equal. It's baloney. There were noble monks and there were middle-class monks and nuns and so on, and you ended up going to the place which fit your social status. And then what's important here is, he keeps emphasizing this, it's a place that was most segregated from males. Mikola Kamriot. Kihema, this chevra, these nuns never left. No man set foot in the convent, except very, very rarely, and under extreme circumstances. When if the bishop really needed to meet with the abbess, the doctor comes, then he would come, but he had to first get permission from the bishop. Okay. Vayihi ba'et lechta hayu ima sheva nochriot ubeit dironim. She was now, but this is a major achievement. When a Jew goes to convert, this becomes, I mean, one of the things that you find in throughout medieval Jewish history is that when a Jew finally converts, I mean, it could be, Yankel de Wasserträger, who's going to become Giacomo de Santa Maria or something like that. He could find himself having a duke or the king as his godfather, bringing him to the baptismal font, because every Jew who converted was considered a major victory for the church. All right, so they make a procession. She goes. There were seven Christian women, and they might have been nuns, and two burghers. La votail beta komriot. Vatihi sham kol hayom. She stayed there all day. V'chol halayla. She's there all night. And in the morning, Vatipayim Rucha, this is a pasuk from Parshat Yosef, and she all of a sudden she changes her mind, she has a change of heart. Letov. Vinei Shachar Allah, dawn rose, Vishalchai Le'egmon, she sent a message to the bishop, Kishafa Nafsha Lashuv El Beita, I want to go home. Why? Because then she remembered. Why was it that Falcone makes such a point of describing the moral probity of this nunnery, of this convent? Because Eshet Kohen Ani. Now, one of the more problematic issues is that if Chalila, a Jewish girl, is raped, a Jewish girl or married Jewish woman is raped, then that does not impact upon their ability to be able to return to their spouse. In the case of a Kohen, that's not the case. A Kohen, the wife of a Kohen who's a Shvuya, who is held captives by non-Jews, the assumption is that she will be raped. And therefore, in the absence of evidence to the contrary, she's not allowed to go back to her husband. Now, I have to tell you, by the way, I don't know if Rav Hanan has been following the discussion, but there are a number of far from the madding crowd and far from the media discussions now, in anticipation, God forbid, of the possibility that this may come up when, please God, the married hostages are returned. This is a ticking time bomb which has to be addressed, and the resolutions thereof have to be addressed in advance. But anyway, so she already knows. So he has. That's why Falcone had to come up with this. That there's absolutely no men there. Men weren't allowed, and when they were allowed only in certain circumstances and under control, and there was never a possibility of ever being a shvuya. If I stay here a few days, I won't be able to go back and live with him. He'll have to divorce me. This became known that the fact that she had a change of heart became known to the bishop, because in the morning a Jew named Zalman, again he's a Yeka, Lerod Derech Yashar, had showed up to visit the visit. This is a little bit unfortunate. They come to the visit. Apparently, Falcone sent his friend Zalman to say, "Listen, she's going to convert, fine, but get the jewelry and the silver out of her hands." Okay. Anyway, so this came up, and the bishop sees the Zalman. He says, "Forget it, not a problem." Why are you coming here for the jewelry and for the silver? She wants to go home. So this Zalman says to the bishop, she says, let her stay for a few days, 10 days, and we'll see what happens. So the bishop says, the bishop screams at the Jew. She explained to me that if she doesn't get out of here soon, she won't be able to go back to her husband. And you're telling me she should stay for 10 days? In Tiesha Bod Laila Ki Eshet Koheni. Okay. So he says, so the Jew says, he sees it's not a setup. Amar say do, and what's in your power to get her out of here. So then the bishop sent for me, meaning Falcon. He says he went sent for me. He told me what was going on. Your wife wants to go home. But I'm afraid for her because you're going to be mean to her. You're going to shortchange her. You're going to make her suffer. You're going to talk to her and you're going to yell at her and you're going to rebuke her. Alta says it. Don't do it. He says, what did she do to you? If you're going to give her chelek, do it nice. Anyways, in the evening he comes and she goes home and Shalom Yisrael. So what was the shaila? So the shaila was, can I stay married to her? Because she was 24 hours in the convent. I'm not going to we're using this story to be able to get a sense of the fabric of life. I will just tell you that the Marik bends over backwards and spits with nickels to allow her to stay with her. I mean, he says in advance. He just as I remember Rabbi Tendler, Zachron L'Bracha, once when I learned the Chasnita with him, used to like before we even started learning Chasnita at the time, he quoted the Chassam Sofer, and the Chassam Sofer in one place says that Kashem shemitzvah lahatir aguna la'alma kain mitzvah lahatir isha labala afilu layla echad. That just as it's a mitzvah, it's a the prime directive to permit an aguna to remarry la'alma. So it's a mitzvah to bend over backwards and find any way possible to allow for a woman to return to her husband if she's in nida, even just if it adds one more day of marital relations. So that's a policy point of departure. It doesn't always work, but that should be your orientation. This is exactly what happened here. And he goes on and on and on. It's a very long tshuva. It's a very important tshuva, in which he says that there's no problem and she can stay with him. And one of the major considerations, interestingly, apparently Marie Cullen was either knew the bishop personally or knew of him. A big part of the heter, of the allowance of letting the woman go back, was that he admired and respected the religious integrity and the moral integrity of the bishop. I mean, it comes out to be statistics. By the way, when non-Jews sleep with Jewish women, that's considered to be an act of opprobrium among goyim, so they're not going to do it. All right, it's not exactly. This is not the National Conference of Christian and Jews, but there is this sense, very profound sense, that he is willing to take the integrity of the non-Jew into consideration as part of his calculus for allowing the woman to stay with her husband. But this is a snapshot of life of a small community small community where the needs or the options for making a living are so limited that they take a tremendous toll on a family. And to what acts of desperation, to what deeds of desperation will that circumstance drive somebody? Now, there's a famous story. One of the richest Jews in Italy at the time, he was a very close friend of Cosimo de' Medici. His name was Yechiel da Pisa. His house still exists, actually, in Pisa. You can still see it's about half a kilometer, less, actually. It's about a quarter of a kilometer from the Tower of Pisa. Yechiel da Pisa had a daughter who Clemenza, the father wanted to make a shidduch, and she didn't want the shidduch. So she she wanted out, so she ran away. She converted, and she married an impoverished nobleman. I mean, you can marry for money, all right, fine. But I mean, because you were locked into your box. This is not nothing flows over here. So that's that part of that side of Jewish life. Now, when I first encountered the story, I mean, it's of course has many different angles to it as well, and I thought that was I thought that was the end of the story. And he says he's going to move, he's going to close the shop, everything's going to be fine. I first read this story in 1982, I think 83. In the late 80s, Professor Shlomo Simonson of Tel Aviv University published how many volumes is it? I have it up there. 4-volume documentary history of the Jews in the Duchy of Milan. Basically, what he did was he went and he published, partly in translation, partly in summary, all of the relevant documents in the what's the word, in the records of the Duchy of Milan regarding Jews. And this pops up. Okay, this is this is a formal request in Latin that was made to the ducal court in 1479. See the date at the bottom, on the 7th of August, 1479. So it's like 9.5 years after our little episode. Duces Mediolani. I'm addressing this to the Duke of Milan. Nomine Falcone Ebrei Hospitis Ebreiorum Civitate Notis Papia Tenoris Transcripti Accipemus. We have accepted the application of a Jew by the name of Falcon, who is the owner of a hotel, or of an inn, of a Jewish inn, in our city of Pavia. It was addressed to Listrissime Principes, addressed to the illustrious and excellent prince of whatever. I won't. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's he basically this is a gambling license application. In other words, he's trying to expand his operations, and he wants permission to set up a casino for Jews. Interesting. They didn't want to have Christians and Jews gamble together. Gambling was a big deal in Italy. We'll see in a minute that was like one of the major Jewish pastimes. He wanted to expand his operations, not just give food and lodging and whatever. He wanted to have a casino that would attract more Jews to come to his inn in Pavia. And so he had to apply, but you have to get the gambling license. So he applied to the Duke for the gaming license. In other words, 9 years after he promises on his honor that he's going to move and they're going to go back to Mantova, whatever, he's still there, and the wife is still there, and the daughters are still there, and he's extending operations. And my heart goes out to Mrs. Falcone. But the truth of the matter is, there was no, I mean, I don't know the specific circumstances of what kept him there. But the truth is that you were limited in what you were allowed to do. I told you that one of the reasons why there was such a dispersion, and this will close, was the dispersion of populations, of small communities. So there's a limit to what you can do in every city, because in cities were only ready to accommodate and tolerate X number of Jews in their midst. It's a whole nother ballgame. Next time, we are going to start talking about these guys, the church and the Jews, and a very, very important world war that goes on between historians about exactly how close and how intimate were the Jews and the Christians at the time. Okay, 12:45. We'll see you next week.
Thank you very much for another fascinating share. We're looking forward for next week. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hi, Rav Hanan. Can I get the recording of this Zoom? Because this past session I was in and out. I had phone calls the whole time.
Yes, I'll send it to you. Sure.
Here, thank you.